We still don't have that
We
right.
still have not managed to do that well. You're welcome, Internet. Welcome to all who are joining us for this podcast and the, I guess, video cast. I don't know what that's called.
Recording.
That doesn't sound right.
Video.
Video.
Killed the radio star.
Yeah. Nice job.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be here all week.
Today's episode brought to you by Kellogg's Frosted Flakes with crispy cinnamon basketballs. That's literally. I'm not making that
Wait,
part up.
what?
That's actually what it says.
Dude, I have to get up and bring that over to the camera later.
I don't know what the cinnamon crispy basketballs are.
Bruh.
I love basketball, but not the cinnamon crispy kind.
Did you eat what was in there, or did you just
No.
use the box?
The box was given to me.
I gotta Google this. Hey y'all, I know we have important things to discuss, but no, deal with it.
Inquiring minds want to know.
Frosted Flakes. Excuse me. Cinnamon basketballs. Oh, they had Shaq's face on them. That's awesome. That makes them better. Yo,
I feel legitimately terrified.
yo, look at this.
Oh, yeah, that's awful.
It's the best.
That is terrifying beyond all reason.
Is it though? Is
Yeah.
it really?
Yeah. That and Yzma.
Spoiler alert. The Kronk's New Groove
Yeah.
might be better than Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Kronk's New Groove is really good.
It is. Adam. I don't have a. Hold on. Do I have a. Dun, 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 dun. Oh yeah, I do. I don't think that
That doesn't work.
summons. None of these summon my current mood. It's your last one, man.
This is my last podcast.
See, I brought notes. Just kidding. It's Adam's sermon that I've doodled on.
He doodled on it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Sad.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this.
Oh.
I'm drinking water to replenish the tears that are going to come later. Kelly, what are you doing? Drinking fluids? Y'all, you're going to keep seeing me do this because it's my nervous tick. It's my thing.
I have no nervous tics.
I only tick when I lie. Last one, man. Last one.
But I think we're ending on a good one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All good things must come to an end, and sometimes bad things must also come to an end.
All good things except the Lord of the Rings must come to an end.
Also fair. Also fair. All right, man. Bring us in.
All right. So, for those of you who listen to the podcast, congratulations. You're getting an early Christmas present because this isn't the sermon I preached last week. This is the one that I'm going to preach on Sunday. And it's based off of 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 through 21, which is a passage that holds a great deal of sentiment to me. And so I'm going to share a story as to why this passage is the one that I choose to kind of have as the last one we talk about in a podcast. So cast your minds back to the long ago time of 2008.
When?
Like 14 years ago. It wasn't that long. So I was in seminary, and I was dating a lovely young lady named Danielle.
I think I've met her.
You may have met her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we had been going together for about a month, and it was our fourth date. I decided this is the one where I'm going to impress. And so I made her a steak dinner because she's from Texas, and I know that Texans like steak.
Meat.
Yeah. And I rented the local gazebo, so we had steak as the sun is setting, and I had some Celtic like dance music, and we were dancing, and I kissed her, and it was our first kiss. It was
Aw.
magical. Like, cats and dogs were living together. It was wonderful. There were little sparkly stars that were falling from the sky, and fairies were flying around. It was beautiful. And so after the date, I take her back to her dorm room, drop her off, and then I worked third shift at the local hotel. So I go to work, and, I'm spending the whole night going, I knocked that one out. I hit that one out of the park. That was good. I did a good job. And she meets me at 7 a.m. the next morning and says, we need to talk.
You know
Y'all,
what that means.
you know what that means. She took me on what she is lovingly called the walk of death.
The walk of death.
She had taken several seminary guys on the walk of death in her day. And during the walk of death, she explained to me that it wasn't going to work. We couldn't continue to date because my plan after seminary was not to go to Texas. Her plan was to go to Texas. We weren't going to do this long term, long distance. Nope. And so she's like, and we're done. And I'm like, what? I thought I hit it out of the park. I made steak.
I made steak.
They were sparklies. So, fast forward to Sunday. After church, I get a phone call, and it's Danielle. And she says, hey, can I come over? Can we talk? Yeah, okay. She comes over, and she says, so I was at church today, and the pastor was preaching on 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 through 21. And he said, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. And I realized that I was living in fear when I broke up with you. Can we restart this relationship? Can we be boyfriend girlfriend again? And I'm like, I didn't want to break up in the first place.
Take me back.
Take me, please. I got nowhere else to go.
I love it.
And so that ended up being the passage we used for our wedding.
That's awesome.
And I feel like that has been one of the formative passages in my entire life and in my ministry. And it centers for me around two things. First and foremost, I'm going to quote scripture 2 times. God is love. And secondly, there is no fear in love. So that's what I want to leave Floresville with. That and a story about how my wife almost broke up with me.
This is totally unscripted, but I got a similar story
Ooh.
about me and Amanda.
All right.
So for those of you who haven't met my wonderful wife,
Did she take you on the walk of death?
no. So if you've met me, you know that I'm going to tell you what I think, even if you don't always ask.
Never experienced that side of Kelly every single time I've met him ever.
So Adam gave some really good context to where they were, what he was dealing with, how it was going to go. So I'm a part of all of the young adult Christian stuff at this giant mega church in San Antonio, right? And I've had my heart broken by 2 different girls within the last year, right? Brutal, right? I'm at the age where I'm like, okay, I want to date, and once I figure out if like we have a lot in common, then the goal of that is relationship is for marriage. Like I'm not gonna just date and hey, like you're cool, like let's be boyfriend. Like the point of it is to find a partner, right? Long term. And so I meet this girl at church, volunteers in a room that I'm helping run in the kids wing, and I get her plugged in with all of the young adult stuff that I'm doing, right? Because I'm involved in everything at this giant church. And so we're hanging out a lot, and so I go to what's called 242, which is this young adult thing, and Amanda's going to school in San Marcos, and so she would drive in, whatever, to hang out with everybody, right? So she's running late, but we had talked about going to see Snow White and the Huntsman. This is how long ago this is.
Wow.
And
I didn't think anybody went to see that movie.
so I'm like, hey, do you want to go? I don't remember if she initiated or I initiated. I think she said she wanted to see it. I was like, hey, let's go. And like, I'm stupid. That hasn't changed. I've always been dumb. Like, you're like, oh, there were sparklies. I totally misread this situation. I'm also dumb. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go with you. So I buy tickets to midnight showing. Now, I'm also like the guy living at my parents' house without a car. So Amanda's going to come pick me up. So my buddy Carl drives me back to where I live so Amanda can come get me because we're going to the midnight showing. And he's like, hey, dude. I'm like, yeah. He's like, where's Amanda? I was like, oh, she's on her way. We're going to go see a movie. And he went, just the two of you? And I said, yeah. And he said, just the two of you? I said, uh-huh. And he said, who bought the tickets? I said, I did. He's like, dude, that's a date. And I went, I started to panic because I'm like super messed up. Other thing you wouldn't know is, for context, is I prayed like a month before I met Amanda that I would never date somebody younger than me ever again, and God laughed in my face. Because then I met Amanda and she's younger than me. So anyway, so she comes and picks me up, so I'm like super uncomfortable because I'm like, what is this? I don't know what to do. So we get to the theater, and Amanda, who is, you've met her, very appropriate, like awesome, right? Communicates how she feels in a respectable, good way, not like me. She looks me in the face and goes, hey, I just want you to know that I'm not really interested in dating and I'm not looking for a boyfriend. So because I'm me, I take that in stride, right? Because I'm not sure what's supposed to happen. Like, no, I'm an idiot. So I tell this wonderful person that she has issues for like 45 minutes. Like, as I've gotten to know her, like, I'm doing all this stuff. To the point, if you asked Amanda about that now, she'd be like, she didn't even know she wanted to talk to me ever again. That's how bad this went. Terrible. Terrible. And somehow, God's grace, man. Maybe it's a prevenient grace for her. Is that just punishment? Making her stay with me?
Clearly did something.
She did something wrong.
She chose poorly.
So then our second date, like this is our other go hang out, like my dog dies right before we go on to hang out. It's just these things. But like you, like against all odds, now I'm married for coming up on 8 years in December, have a young son, and we have our daughters on the way in September. And so I love what you're saying, and I can totally relate to your story because, God is love and there's no fear in love. And I was terrified.
Right?
And it made me do stupid things. It didn't make me. I did stupid things. But so if you're lonely and single out there, if there's hope for me, there's hope for you.
I think the moral of the story is make the mistake and then insult them for 45 minutes and you're golden.
And I think I'm overplaying that a little bit, but I definitely was not. It wasn't weird like machismo stuff too. It was just like trying to help her because I thought she needed helping.
Help me help
Because
you
I'm
in ways
so
that you don't want help.
stupid. So Adam's like a good guy, and I'm a putz. But but yeah, so I love that this has become such a big part of you. I'm thankful for you sharing your heart, and I'm thankful that this is a really cool place to like your manifesto, like the last thing you really want to say. And I know we're going to go more in depth on Sunday, but I want to go a little bit more in depth with you now. But I just, and knowing Danielle, I can totally see this. Like when she knocked on the door and you opened it, you were like,
Oh yeah, I was.
she's like, "Why are you crying?" And you're like,
I'm not crying. You're crying.
like
She's like, no, I'm not. I'm dead there. I don't cry.
I love that you called it. What did you call it? The dead place?
The dead place. The walk of death. I mean, that's what she called it. That was her name for it.
That is a Danielle thing too, for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. So you said there is no fear in love, and God is love. So let's unpack those a little bit. Why are those so important to you, and why are they so important for you to communicate them well before you leave?
Sure. So I think I'm going to start with number 2 first, because the core identity of humanity is as image bearers of one whose core identity is perfect, whole love. So John Wesley, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have the quote in front of me. John Wesley said, God is often stylized as by other adjectives, right?
Holy, just,
Yeah,
righteous.
Holy is the Lord. Just is the Lord. Righteous is the Lord. But none of those are spoken in a sense of identity. Love is so much a defining attribute of the triune one that God is called love.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that it is critically important that we do not. It's like the square and the rectangle thing, right? A square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle is not necessarily a square. Love is not necessarily God. There are, I love Oreo blizzards. That's not the same thing as godly love. I love Peyton Manning. Not necessarily the same thing as godly love. Close, but not necessarily the same. So God isn't love in an abstract, idealized sense. God is love in the most concrete, the most real of realities. The center point of all the universe is these 3 words: God is love. And so often we approach the Almighty and we engage in relationship with God in ways that ignore that God is love. You wouldn't approach with fear a parent that you know loves you. And yet, for me, that dovetails into that there's no fear in love, because when we are approaching the throne of the Almighty and we're shivering and trembling like Dorothy and her friends before the Wizard of Oz, we're carrying baggage from ourselves. We're not approaching the one who speaks, my child, over us.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking of some other verses too. Like one of them is, we love because God first loved us.
Also in this passage.
Right. And so what's important to me, and I wrote the word constant on my notes here. What's really important, I think, about the distinction you're making, right? Excuse me, is that there's a constant there. Like there's a trustworthiness there. There's it's not movable. Right? So God being love is such a loaded statement in the sense of this is how it is. This is how God is. This is God's constant place or state of being, if you will. It's from this place, right? It's from this posture. And we were talking a little bit about this earlier today, right? In our perceptions of things change, right? And God, I think, is willing to take time with us and is patient with us, not because we're screw-ups and we're terrible, but because we're learning that that is trustworthy. That God is love, God actually is love, and it takes time. So to loop it back to your story about Danielle, there is a lot of things that you could have done in that moment that would have shifted how that went.
Yeah.
Right. You received her in love. You valued her from a posture and a position of love. You could have very easily been like, you broke my heart. Why would I talk to you?
Sure, that's exactly who I am.
But in that, right? Like
Needy person that I was in the time. That's
we're not talking about unhealthy. But
Listen, friends, if someone comes to your door that you kind of like and they say, "Would you take me back?" You say yes. It's just like with Ghostbusters. If someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
yes. But in that, right? Like so there's opportunities there for that to go differently. Right, but because you were coming from a place of, you call it neediness, I'll call it love to make my example work.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a much nicer term. You know.
Can't wait to hear this Sunday and be like, Danielle, I'm sending you the play-by-play. It's not going well. Just kidding. But there's two distinctions I want to make. The one is that this is God's state of being, and then two, God is patient with us and with you. As you learn that is actually trustworthy. It takes time, it takes relationship, and it takes God over and over. And I don't mean when I say God proving God's self to us is that like God exists to prove God's self to us. That's not the posture I'm talking about. But what I mean is that your relationship with Danielle now is better than it was when you started.
Yeah.
Because you have been through stuff. And your love for one another has been tested, and it has not been shown wanting or lacking. You've grown together. You've proven to one another that, like, oh, you were trustworthy. And I think it functions very much in a similar vein with God, where God's like, I'm not going to shift. I'll be here. I'm going to be like this. I'm this way, right? And you're going to learn that that is true. And I'll walk with you as you understand that. So when you say God is love, I think that's such an important part, not just in this passage, but God is as a whole, the Trinity as a whole, right? Our last two conversations. But that this is God's state.
Yeah. There's a word in Hebrew and a word in Greek that we most often associate with the kind of love that we understand to be godly love.
Yeah.
The Hebrew word is hesed.
Okay.
If I were pronouncing that, I didn't drink enough water. Hold on. Hesed. There we go. That's it.
Oh, no, I got something for this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But hesed is if you read the Bible, oftentimes it'll say steadfast love in the Old Testament.
Okay.
But it is that constant, reliable, never failing, never abandoning, ever seeking, ever reconciling. All will find you wherever you wander off to. Faithful, whole love. The second one is agapao, or as we would most often phrase it, agape. And this agape love, we really identify with the incarnation of Jesus.
Right.
It is a sacrificial, self-outpouring, will give up everything for you, devoted love.
It's really good. It's interesting too that obviously the sacrifice of Christ is unique. Get that on the table, before I step in it. That's unique. That doesn't happen more than once. It's not it doesn't happen again a second time, right? Like there's a pivotal moment in the history of all the things,
Yeah.
all things, right, where this happens. This is a moment. But it's interesting to me too because it's not as though, like, our understanding of Jesus doing it is because we can go, what does Adam say to Eve? Like bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, right? Like,
That's right.
So there's this closeness or this proximity to Christ where it's like it's tangible. It's like you and I, we are like, and because it's not like God wasn't sacrificing
Right.
the whole time anyway, right? There's just this really grandiose, wonderful, important representation of that in the personhood of Christ that we can relate to in a way where I'm not saying God was like, okay, you get it now, but it's almost that way of this is the love letters in the Old Testament, the prophecies, where it's like you're all gonna die, but I love you. I've been yearning for you. I have stayed my hand. I have held back to protect you, to care for you. I've sacrificed, right? Like, and then in the personhood of Christ, it's lived. And that's not to cheapen or belittle or to shift it or to make them different things, but it's almost like for me, it's like, oh, I get it now. Duh. Like, duh, this is what you've been doing.
Right. Love made touchable.
Love made human, like love and then even for us too, the example of that is that in humanity's intended created state, that's how we also be. That's how we also are. That's what God is offering to us of, hey, be like this. Let's have this with me and with everybody else, which I love. All right, now the really fun part, because I think the crux of our conversation, I really want to talk about, there is no fear in love. And one of the things that always bugs me, not about you, but about when people preach this or they talk about it, they spend all this time talking about the love component and the consequence of having fear, which I also think is not what this is getting at. But they don't spend enough time kind of explaining or framing what fear actually is. So if we say there is no fear in love and all of us are going, oh no, if we want to be in God, then we have to be love and not fear. But I don't know what this fear is and I don't know what that means. So
Now I'm afraid of being afraid.
now I'm afraid of being afraid so that I don't screw up the thing. And so I would love to hear your thoughts
Right.
on this.
It's funny because I think the verse goes a little bit further. It says, there's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. And so I think when we gain that fear, that oh my gosh, am I fearing, like, it really is pointing out the very thing that's like, y'all, that the whole point of it is that we tend to be fear-based because we expect to get punished. And it's a revelatory thing of,
Yeah.
if the way you love others is based on punishment and reward, it's not the same that kind of love that Jesus is loving with. So experience real freedom and real love and let go of it. Let go of those things. Because that perfect love of Jesus casts out that fear of being punished. Jesus came saying, I did not come to condemn the world. And everybody's like, he's going to hurt us.
Okay. Save us, but hurt them.
Right? It reminds me of a Star Trek song by that was on Dr. Demento, where they have
Demento,
love
man.
Dr. Demento. He's so good, but it's Captain James T. Kirk, and he comes down and he says, "We come in peace, shoot to kill, shoot to kill." And it's like, we're like, Jesus is like, "I come in peace." They're like, "Oh, he's gonna get us."
Right.
And so the triune God is like, I am perfect love. And we're like, oh, we're going to screw this up and he's going to hate us so much.
I love when I talk to people and they go, yeah, but Jesus is coming back with a sword. And I'm like,
The Bible's the defining. It's not.
but you haven't even like sat in the presence of Christ where God's like, I love you. You're already just in the middle of like, can I mess this up? Like, God's going to come back and then we're all screwed. So like everybody, Jesus is coming back. Get busy.
Look busy.
And it's to your point, right? It's that bend in us, right? We call it sin. You call it your fallen nature.
Yeah.
Call it compromise. Call it
Which we affirm really does exist. We have
Yes,
seen it.
absolutely, and
His
myself
name is-
first and foremost.
Right, same. I was going to say his name is Tom Brady.
I thought you were gonna say his name is Kelly Compton.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh!
ouch.
Wow.
You just motioned to all of me. Thanks. But in that, right, is so for me, the way that I define fear, the place that I, the hill I die on, right, the place that it makes sense to my person, is I go like every time we talk in here, I always go back to the garden, and I think about self-reliance. And this isn't, and I want to just separate that for a sec. So when I say self-reliance, I don't mean the self-deprecating, like we're only capable of terrible, blah, blah. Like that's not what I'm getting at, because I do think God's creation is good inherently. And I do believe also that what people are capable of is wonderful. Like fulfilled lives that are living out their purposes as they are intended to be are awesome and good, right? Where we get in trouble is when what we see with Adam and Eve is they eat the fruit and God says, you'll die. And the snake's like, no, you won't. And they're like, no, we won't. Is they stop looking at God for, well, God is love, and now God is dangerous. There's now consequences for things, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm going to get what I deserve instead of what God has promised to me. Because even then, when we say promise, people go like, but do you deserve it? Like there's this wage or this like it's earned, right? And all this other stuff. And so my point about fear is I view this passage, and this is how I've wrestled with it and how I define it or how it helps me, is fear is everything that God is not. Fear's goal, or what fear can do, is it makes me turn inward, and I trust my own self. And as soon as I make that bend and I go, well, I know best, then it's awful. It's just destructive. It's harmful. It hurts me. It hurts other people. Like, it hurts my relationship with God, because I'm like, no more, God. You cannot love me. I did this thing. And God's like, Kelly, I am love. Me did this. I am the love. Like, I am it. Okay? I'm like, uh-huh. That's it, Kelly. Oh, okay, fine. like, okay. But fear is trauma, it's pain, it's learned. And so to oversimplify it, I say it's the things that God is not. And for me, it just because I have to make it simple. So God is love, then fear is the opposite of God. Or it can lead to places that are the opposite.
Yeah. Fear also seems to be a response that we run toward.
Isn't that great?
Right. It's like the exact wrong direction is the direction we're going to run. And here's where I see that. So I have a daughter who is, for those of you who do Enneagram, she's a 1. She's a perfectionist. She understands her value in the world by whether or not she does everything perfectly. She is currently taking a STAR test right now, the first of her many years of standardized testing. Thank you, government. Because because those are so helpful. Can't just let our wonderful teachers teach, because... But
Let's
so
not use these as a baseline. Let's attach funding to these.
right. So my daughter this morning was very anxious and afraid. And this is a conversation I've had with Susanna frequently. Whenever Susanna messes up and gets in trouble, because sin is real.
If you ask Susanna, it's not her fault. It's Rebecca's fault.
No, actually, she owns it, and
Oh yeah, the one.
she's the one. So she owns it, internalizes it. That is
Ugh.
her core being now, is the one who failed to throw away the trash, and that's going on her permanent record. And
I want that on a T-shirt. I failed to throw away the trash. Father, look upon me with favor, please. I'm so sorry.
she's gonna appear before the gates, and Peter's like, "Well, that time when you were 6 years old and you forgot to throw away the trash. That's it."
That is literally Susanna.
That is absolutely who she is. And so I have to, so what I frequently find myself saying to her is, Susanna, does Daddy love you? Yes. Why does Daddy love you? Well, because I get good grades and I do my... Nope. Do you know why Daddy loves you? No, why? Because you are you, and you are mine. Because you are who you are, I love you. Now, clean up the room and throw away the trash. Wait, no, I'm sorry. But for me, when I have failed to throw away the trash, you can interpret any sin you want in for that, friends. And I am terrified that I'm about to be smote is the word. I have to remind myself that there is a voice who whispers to me, because the Holy Spirit whispers, Adam, I love you because you are who you are, and you are mine.
I think for me, it's one of the things that's so important about understanding that we're created beings. And hear this very clearly. I think this is in line with what we're talking about. Is if you are created, then you are exactly who God made you. Doesn't mean you don't have afflictions. It doesn't mean you're not going through stuff. But you have value and worth inherently because you are created the way that you are. And for me, one of the things that fear is a struggle in, right, is that because it's like we're not good enough, right? And as opposed to that God has come to me as I am in a posture of love, and that I am who I am, and God and I are going to go on a journey.
That's very Popeye of you.
I am who I am.
Don't know why he yams.
And because I do hold to this idea, right, that it doesn't mean that we're not going to go on journeys, and that God won't leave us where God meets us and finds us, right? There's progress to be made. There's the cutting of the chaff and throwing it into the fire. But you have to start, foundationally, in my opinion, starting from the place of God is love, and I am loved because I am specifically me. Not because one day I'm going to get better. Not because there's no qualification other than the fact that God made you, and you are you. What's the Dr. Seuss quote? You are the youest you. Like, oh man, it's like one of my favorites, and I can't remember it now.
Kelly, I hate to break your heart, but I had a different upbringing. I did not get to read Dr. Seuss
right.
as a child.
But you are the only you. And that's on purpose. There's an intentionality there. There's a point there. That is by design, that you are the you, that you are the you, that you, and I can't.
What's a Ute?
And I'm circling around here, right? But like, it's just so critically important. Like you're telling your daughter, like, I love you because you are you. But what if you are you, and I love you, and you know,
And
it's good.
I think that you hit on it, because we understand that there is a process. There is a grace works in us to sanctify us.
Yes.
To say that the Almighty Creator loves us where we are as we are isn't saying that, well, I don't need to worry about treating people well, or I don't need to work on how I start dates. Or
Hey.
hey,
Oh wait, no. Good. Let
Yeah,
me have it
yeah.
because I'm never going on another date ever
you're never
again.
going on another date. You're okay.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm off the market. Woo!
But that process is what happens as a response to and walking in love, rather than that process leads us to finally be accepted by love. The fear tells us we have to walk through all of our junk and get the house in order and clean up the inside of ourselves, and then present ourselves before the Holy of Holies and will be loved. Whereas the Incarnation tells us, the Holy of Holies has come to you. Walk with me, and we'll wash up on the way.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about, the sanctification process, right? Is that perfect love drives out the fear. That's the process. The process is the trust. The process is the wholeness. The process is the restored intimacy, right? I'm thinking of this story, I think it's in Genesis. Yeah, it's Genesis, where God makes the pact with Abraham. And so there's two places in Scripture where a character, like a cloud, shows up and like a character goes to sleep, deep sleep. And this is when Adam goes to sleep and then Eve is created right from the rib, and then where Abraham is. So old culture. I mean, I can't even date this because I couldn't tell you. But Abraham's day, right? What you would have is you'd probably have like a hill. I'm trying to like put this on the camera. You'd have like a hill, and so there'd be parties or tribes or clans or groups of people.
Usually kings of two cities.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you would have essentially like you'd have a weaker party and a stronger party. And the stronger party would sit on top of the hill. And so, in Abraham's day, what you would do is you would take a specific amount of livestock. I don't even remember if it's like a specific amount or whatever you, in relation to what you had, but you would cut them up and massacre them, and you would do all this stuff. And then you would walk through that carnage up to the hill, and then you would swear fealty to whatever the stronger party was. And you would be making a blood covenant or a pact that whatever you had committed to get their protection, you would do. And if you backed out of your end of the deal, all of that carnage was a representation of you and your household.
Yeah. What happened to the animals and all their icky entrails and icky bits? Let that happen to me.
Right. And it's just a brutal, and the only person who has risk here is the person who needs the help.
Yeah, it's only the weaker party.
It's only the weaker party. And so there's this beautiful picture. Well, not beautiful picture. Probably smell pretty bad.
Beautiful picture of massacred, dismembered animals.
And I'm paraphrasing because God tells Abraham this is where we get, by the way, this is where you get these ritualistic sacrifices. This is where this happens. So Abraham has very specific instructions from God to do very specific things to specific animals and leave them a specific way. Okay? And so this is normal, by the way, and I gave that context because if you, the biblical reader, go and read this, you're going to be like, what the heck is going on? And this is what this is a representation of.
Yeah, that was a normal practice in the ancient Near East.
It's something. It's also like God coming to us with prevenient grace and love. is that God is even choosing to relate to Adam in a way and teach Adam something.
Abraham
in a way where Abraham will understand what God is doing.
Right.
So here's what happens. It's awesome. This has become one of my favorite Bible stories, by the way. Abraham does all this and says, okay, God. And then God causes Abraham to fall into a deep sleep, and then a cloud, a dark cloud, which is a representation of God, walks through the animals to Abraham, and then God swears upon God's self. So for those of you who play cards or who gamble or who do betting, the most valuable thing that God can swear upon, the most supreme thing,
So help me.
is so help me. I swear upon myself that I will not back out of what I have promised to do. I love that imagery so much because it's like, okay, God, are you going to take care of me? God's like, I swear to me, I will. And so it's the freedom, the love, what we're talking about in 1 John 4, and to what Adam's getting at, and what I love about all of this stuff is that God says so. Now, does Abraham go through a bunch of really ridiculous, difficult stuff? Yes.
Often because of Abraham.
Often. I promise you'll have a kid. Bring me the concubine. Stupid.
I promise I will be with you and keep you safe. Yeah, my wife, nope, she's my sister.
But the point is that I'm a pastor. I've been married for 8 years. I have a wonderful kid who adores me. Hopefully the next one does too. And I'm still learning to trust God in that. There is still fear in me that God is ironing out and moving out of me, while God is also accepting me as I am. And there's days where, like, I'm back in fear that I'm almost positive God got rid of, and I'm just struggling through it.
Yeah.
But God is still working.
Yeah. And I do believe that, as Methodists, we believe that it's possible to be perfected in love in this life. And it's also possible to forget that. So I think for me, the final word that I want to give to the church is, church, you worship a God whose defining characteristic, his special darling, as Augustine called it, his reigning attribute is love. You worship that kind of God. You are loved just because you're you. And I will miss you, and I love you too.
Adam Knapp. I love you, man.
I love you, man.
My life is so much better because you and your family are in it. I have benefited eternally from your friendship, from your leadership, from your example of being a pastor, of being a husband, and being a dad. I will severely miss you in this context. But know that I also love you. And I'm grateful.
I was specifically not looking in your eyes when I was saying the earlier part. Kelly, man, I have loved doing these podcasts with you. I have loved getting to serve with you. I've loved getting to know you, man. I want you to know I will continue to love you. And I continue to pray that God continues to work through you, man.
And with that, signing off, this is Pastor Kelly.
This is Pastor Adam.
We love you.
We love you, church.